Welcome back. This is the Muse Memorandum, and I'm JJ, your host. And this is the second episode of what I'm calling season one. And today, or this evening, I should say, I have a really special guest again. This is a person that I've known for years. We were friends back in high school, and I'm really pleased to be reacquainted with you again and just get to know you and all of the wonderful things that you've been working on with your music and everything else. So I'm not going to waste too long. I'm just going to invite you on, and everyone, this is my friend who goes by the name of the Third Kind. Welcome, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Yeah, that was a great intro about our long-term friendship. So really happy to connect as well, and I'm very happy in terms of knowing you're in the creative space. We always had a shared love of art, and music. So I'm really happy to connect with you again too.
Same here. Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you dealing with all of the unusual tech things and all that. And I did want to say a little more about you. You're a fairly well-known DJ in your area and probably other places too that I don't know about yet. And in my opinion, a really incredible musician. And I mean, I could call it, I guess, a composer and all kinds of other things related to music. And a tech wizard, in my opinion. So I think everyone will be really interested to hear about you and your work. And if you could just give us a little bit of a background on where your interest started out and like whatever inspirations you had along the way.
Definitely. Early on, well, first off, I make a lot of electronic music, synthesizers, and the like. And when I was much younger, we didn't have the internet. I was not talking to people about other music, so the music came from my parents. And there was new age music at the time, which is very synth heavy, and I just was so drawn to those sounds that I always in my mind was just immediately I need to get a keyboard or a synthesizer so I can express myself because music just overwhelms me at times in terms of its beauty. And with that said, I'd laugh because as I was getting older and getting to middle school and your friends are listening to more music, you get the word of mouth, even fanzine type of approach back in the 90s. And really what came out of the new age is at the time there was this industrial music. It was like dance or EBM, electric body movement. And I was really drawn to that as a kid. It had a lot of just kind of energy to it, a little bit of your teenage angst coming out of it as well, which was fun. So I was always drawn to the repetitive rhythms in terms of my dance side of things. And like you said, kind of reconnected or connected back to my DJ roots that I started back in college. Now, truth be told, one of the things I did or said to myself when I wanted to DJ, and this was back in when I was in the city, I had a little bar gig, which was once every month on a Sunday. And I told myself, do DJing because you ultimately want to play your own music, but DJing will be easier. You'll get more comfortable. And as anyone who probably cringes when I just said that, it is not easier. There's a lot going on when you're DJing as much as, performing your own music, as well as trying to understand a crowd that's not speaking to you. They're talking with their eyes and they're bobbing their heads and stuff. So the DJ side of things, and sometimes I'll make music of that energy. But there's also this other side of myself that I enjoy ambient music, down tempo. You might have heard the term intelligent dance music, IDM, just very creative ways to approach music in ways that are more like from jazz oriented. I love jazz all the way towards just ambient space like Brian Eno. Of course, being a huge influence on myself and a lot of other musicians. But lately with the Third Kind project, I it's focusing more on the ambient. The actual first project I did was for a friend, or artist friend of myself, that ultimately her paintings really extrude so much of, it's definitely animal oriented, but the space that she creates the animals in reminds me of the moor in England, like, just very green and lush and huge flowers, contrasting against her unique animals. uh, I thought it was a great opportunity when she asked me to do the music for her gallery opening. And that was really exciting and scary, but I definitely took the challenge, and I'm really happy with the results of that project. So, but yeah, but that most people, like you said, have mentioned that I have more of a composition, almost a score and things like that. It's, to tell the story. So I really do enjoy just kind of making instrumental music and telling a story out of it.
So to me, it seems like there's a huge like a part of that is very intuitive, especially with the art project that you mentioned. Have you always had that kind of relationship with sound and music?
I would say so. Um, the music has always been very strong in my life. At times, that like anyone that you really needed, or you're looking for a Friday afternoon, a happy hour song, at the end of the week. And I'm drawn I always consider myself a little bit of a sculptor with music, in terms of how I approach my sets and the sounds that I'm creating. It's almost like I want to make it three-dimensional. There has to be something three-dimensional in the sound, and of course in the ultimate track, to really kind of float around in space a little bit and just become familiar with these sounds. And in my mind, the analog sounds you might be familiar with, more the computer sounding, they call it tech house in DJ music, where regular house, if you may call it that, has more instruments and organs and pianos and singers. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But yeah, I totally, especially with the new age music, which I admit, I think it unfortunately has a little bit of a bad rap, but I'm hoping people really are drawn to it because there's so many great musicians out there, that really have this element of setting a space. The new age album covers have pictures of the mountains. I remember Kataro had a big album that I enjoyed, and just looking at that cover as a kid and thinking about West, the way it was painted at me was huge. And then what happened? And this was kind of a bridge from new age into more the industrial, which is a big leap.
Yeah.
I would actually say pop as well, an alternative. Um, but coincidentally, the movie The Neverending Story was a huge influence on me early on, particularly for not only the story but the music about it. Giorgio Moroder did about 4 to 5 songs on the score, as well as composer, for some of the tracks, more of the orchestral type scenes. And there was something, the emotion that those Giorgio Moroder tracks did opened my eyes to say it's not all, it doesn't have to be all peace, and beauty all the time, because we feel all these emotions. Let me see how else I can go, because there was a darkness to the songs Giorgio Moroder did. And moving past that, it really led me down a path of just understanding, namely, that emotion is the driving force of music and creativity in general.
So I know you have done photography and and other visual arts. When you're piecing these tracks together, are you having like a visual experience as well in your mind? Are you visualizing things with those sounds and the layers of everything?
I am. You know, what was interesting about the project for the artist was I only had about 6 to 8 weeks to do it. And I kind of got more businesslike in making my music than I generally do. I mean, if you're a hobbyist or an amateur, you're really just doing it at your own time and things like that. But I almost had this type of project oriented way of doing it. And it turns out I should be doing that more often, basically give yourself a deadline.
Yeah.
And what that did to myself is don't look at all my equipment here as an infinite amount of possibilities. Let's pick a band. Let's have my guitarist and the piano player and the synth player and try to keep it that band. Depeche Mode was always really good at this in their albums. They had a brand, their electronic act, they can use any sounds in the world, but if you listen to their albums, it's like a rock band, the same snare and drum kits. And I think that helps brand an album and puts you in a world a little stronger. So, so that was first, and I just kind of picked my elements and gave it an approach. And like you said, the visual aspect was easy for me for this project because I'm so familiar with her work. So I was able to get myself wrapped into that world pretty easily, and just really happy with the results there. And hopefully at some point get a good release on it.
I hope so, because people should hear it. It's really
Yeah.
incredible. And I like how you used external sounds that maybe weren't necessarily planned at first, like some of the birds and things like that mixed throughout.
Yeah.
So it's excellent. It's so cool to me that you are open to just allowing things like that to happen and actually incorporating them.
Yeah, it's funny. Most of them I try to consider happy accidents. Some are frustrating. One time I was making a track and there was a mourning dove outside. And I don't know if you ever heard them. They can just go on for a while. And
Yes.
I actually find it's beautiful sound. I like them a lot. But this bird was literally an inch from my window. And for 10 minutes, it hasn't budged. And I'm making music and I'm losing my mind until I literally just said, grab my phone, recorded it. Because after a while, you almost expect it to be in your song in a way. It's like part of your band. But I recorded it and made a song out of it, using that sample. And then some of the work in Of the Third Kind, I have I think there's like circular saws, cars driving by, and I take it to me like a challenge to say, well, it's not optimal, but what can I do to represent, it in this fashion? Like it really kind of comes across as wind most of the time, which I was thinking, don't make it sound like a car going by, but get that whoosh. Because a big part of that work was to give the impression of mist and fog, kind of in between world where you see blue skies, but you're still getting wispy fog around you. And that's what I was really after. But yeah, the found elements in working with what you got, I felt that's kind of one of my strengths. It's like a problem solving, in
Right.
terms of being a programmer as well. How can I correct this? As I'm getting better, a lot of the answers do it again, record it again, of course, or get the right equipment. But I think a lot of people, especially in electronic music or any band, overlook the stuff that's actually really unique to them. They're striving for a certain genre or striving for something like this, and your little kind of you know liaison in your song that's something more unique to you. It might seem like a mistake, or you get a sound or the vocals
Right.
aren't perfect. Make it work for you. It could you know it could be a few effects, and just it can take a song totally in a different direction. And a lot of times I have songs that I started and had a certain impression, like you said, the visual picture of it, but you get that one sound that just sticks out and it has this energy to it. You start following it, and then your visual representation changes of where it should go. But yeah, that's your Bob Ross type of.
That was such an
Brian Eno
impact
was
on
important in
us
that. Yeah.
and a lot of other people, different generations. It's especially
Yeah.
for artists. I mean, I think that I don't even know that he was aware that that was going to be such a big deal to people, but it really impacted me, and obviously you and some other people I know that are creative people.
Yeah.
So yay,
We
Bob
had good
Ross.
art teachers. Yay, Bob Ross.
Oh yeah, we had a wonderful art teacher.
Yeah, so we had the same comfort. It was almost like more of a warm environment, the art classes, to be yourself, to do whatever. And I think that really correlates to, like, yeah, Bob Ross is a great influencer of confidence in people. And Brian Eno did a lot of this. I don't know if you ever heard of the oblique strategies. There's like
I
actually an
should
app for it
have,
now.
but no.
It's a series of cards,
Really,
and
sorry.
oh, kidding.
Just keep going.
Yeah, it's a series of cards that have each one. They have like a curveball type of statement on it. Like I might, if I'm making music, it says, step out of your comfort zone and use a marimba, and you're going in a certain direction. I could probably look at some better ones, but it's a way to step out of your kind of box when you get into a creative writer's block or something like that, is to keep it interesting. A kitty.
I'm so sorry. She's a little rambunctious. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, we used to see the kitty. Um, but yeah, it's a series of cards that just give you opportunity to look at different strategies of what your work is. Like turn all the lights off and leave one light bulb on, and you know, you know, use a different color and things like that. So it's pretty unique, and reminds me of those teachers we had, and as well as
I
working
remember
with.
one teacher in particular always talking about liberating the stone. I don't know if you remember that, but that was
Yeah.
actually a really crucial. Just every time I heard that, I carry it through my work still. Even though I don't hear it in my head anymore, I still apply that to things. Liberate the stone, and it's really about finding, just tapping into something that isn't so obviously in front of you, but more, I think, inside of yourself, and
Yeah.
just allowing that to come out.
Right.
At least that's
I've
what it's.
attributed that to like a sculptor that will see a stone. Obviously, I think that more the descriptive way to look at it, but and also the benefits and limitations. Part of our teachers we had, and Brian Eno with the oblique strategies, is that it provides limitations. Like I don't have this sampler that I really want, or I don't have this keyboard, but I have this one. How can I make it work? And realistically, I come to a peace about not having to buy every plugin or buy every piece of hardware to think it's going to be the missing piece, because at some point, with the way technology is these days, you can have all this on your phone and be making tracks in on your tablet. It's a pretty amazing world. You'd be surprised how many pop songs have been made on a phone. There's a lot of,
Yes.
you're on a
Especially these
plane or
days.
something. Yeah, it's a scratch pad kind of thing. So,
Well,
but
since we're in that vein, I know in the last conversation we had, we were talking a bit about AI and VR, AR, NFTs, and
yeah,
kind of what the future might be for artists and musicians, just any kind of artist. With the fact that AI is basically able to replicate anything an artist makes or copy anything, in an instant and put it out there in the world, potentially with the artist's name on it, or maybe not.
Yep.
So I wanted to see maybe if we can touch on that again and your sort of your opinions on that, or just your outlook on that situation and how artists might be able to stay relevant in a tech world that's rapidly approaching, or it's already here, basically.
Right. It's definitely a new frontier. And, you know, the one side of me, programmer, I grew up with sci-fi movies and really getting really excited about this technology that's coming out, what it can do. You know, the Turing test, if you ever heard of that, is, you know, how can you behind a curtain figure out if it's a computer or a human? And a lot of those things, even in the 90s, was still unknown. You know, I felt a little bit that once you get into the structure of a computer, you can kind of see that image. But when it comes to artists, and this is where I was thinking, you know, as an artist, you're either gonna embrace or litigate. It's kind of like there's two options, you know. It's gonna be here. We're gonna embrace it and use it as a buddy to do some scratch type of imagery. But when we get into selling or making profit or using them in a business ad, things to your nature or your brand, that's where it gets really challenging. You're essentially asking for a patent, you know, for your brand in a way. And I think, you know, with artists having similar, you know, type of approaches to art, you know, from abstract, and we put them in subgenres, that this genre of lowbrow to, you know, modernist to whatever it have you is going to be a little helpful to us in able to represent a brand. Now, the NFT scenario, I don't know if this would work because, I mean, theoretically, the NFTs for a certificate on like a ownership of an art never really took off. But I'm thinking if your persona was represented in an NFT, some way representing this is me type of scenario, and if someone used your name in a prompt and said, I want to create art in the likeness of, you know, Dolly, you know, what if Dolly got 3 cents or $5 or what have you from the usage of that prompt? So they can actually have control of keeping the NFT, you know, part of their certificate. They can give it to some, to take it from others, remove it. And I think that would give an opportunity for artists to be more representative. Now, the litigate part, you know, from my perspective, artists and musicians, it's a double-edged sword to be represented in some case. Like, you know, actors have the SAG, you know, and artists themselves, I'm sure there are artist guilds out there and things of that nature, but I also know a lot of artists are against that. They don't want to be part of an ecosystem. They want to be unique, and I get that. And a lot of artists, musicians, are very successful that way. But if you're going to get into that litigate part, you need that class action growth behind you to create some sort of environment that's win-win for everybody. You know, and there are AI representation of art you might have uploaded, that agreement that you've uploaded to a service, and then the learning model only works against the approved and agreed upon imagery that's already been uploaded. So the hard part is knowing that brand. Like, how does your jewelry get represented in a patent like, you know, description versus someone else that might, you know, maybe making, I don't want to say similar, but, you know, how is an AI going to figure out the minute differences in art, you know, artists that they have?
I
It's
don't
a little
know,
little
but
rambling, but
no, that's good. I appreciate it. I feel like, I mean, I don't know enough about these things yet, and I feel like inevitably we're going to have to try to either work with it and embrace it, or, I mean, like you said, just litigate or
yeah,
just work with it. And it seems like it's just rapidly growing, and hopefully there's going to be a way for us to I mean, I don't want to integrate with it.
Yeah.
I don't want to integrate with anything artificial or AI personally. I'm just much more of the natural world and the real hands-on creator process. But I know that, especially in the fields of things like music, where things have become so digitalized and things like
Yeah.
that, where you're not necessarily using real traditional instruments anymore. I don't know. I guess I kind of lost the plot there. But
Well, with music,
basically,
yeah. Go
it's
ahead.
it seems like a sticky road to traverse moving forward, but we're going to have to somehow navigate it.
Yeah. And music has similar challenges of, you know, people creating tracks of using the voice of a well-known artist, a fake voice, and it's almost indistinguishable. And so that's the same persona aspect of a way to represent yourself, because it really boils down to a prompt. When you interact with AI from that stance, you're going to type JJ, in the prompt if I'm looking for something of that likeness. But I think that, coupled with trying to sound like other songs, can get us in a direction where it gets a little more boring. But on the other hand, music, genres over the time from the 80s to the 90s usually explodes from one band out of left field that really can change the direction of a decade in the music. So is it kind of feeding off each other, that can we make better music because AI is limited? But with, with art and also music, there is a little bit of like a fear around it too, in terms of what it provides, what information is being gathered. One of my biggest fears about the AI space was when governments get a hold of it, which came out recently. The reason I feel that way is I don't want to hear the sentence, you can use AI, but you have to use the government's AI. I think that's where it
Exactly.
gets. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I think everyone needs to participate at some level. I'm not saying get on a computer and do this all day, but just follow along to say, here's what I can do. Think of it as a buddy, because it's going to be all transparent one day. Like, most of the time, you're not going to know what it's already happening. You call a phone service sometimes, and we're getting better with the real time talking and against a chat, but training that model is important, to have everyone say, all the people all over the world, no matter what background you have, should be contributing to the AI model, because otherwise it's going to be skewed towards certain, races or countries or anything. We everyone needs to participate. It's like, to me,
Right.
as a champion of it, I would say, check it out, you know, think of small tasks. I've had more success with it in my line of work, taking a large project and having the small tasks help me with those, and I'll take the building blocks and I'll put them all together. And you never know, sometimes it can help you write an email. So I'm
Exactly.
I'm hoping for like organization, support in music. I'm sure any artist, they have such a stock of, you know, I have just tracks everywhere, samples everywhere, named files. And if there's some way I can extrapolate some sort of order in that over time, I think that would be better. It's one aspect of my creative process that I'm trying to get better at, is to, especially as I'm really enjoying the work I'm coming out with, I want to make it as have as much longevity as possible.
Understandably so.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I know I'm switching gears here now. I know you've been doing the Burning Man for several years now, up until recently. And I was wondering if you can share some of the experiences there, um, whatever kind of DJing you've done there, or just any standout experiences you've had while being there.
Yeah, what a crazy event. It's, ultimately, I have gone a few times. I went 9 times, and up till now, and a lot of it's the people. The people really bring you back. You're living with them, you're camping with them, you're getting in fights with them, you're actually you're hugging them. It's almost like that real world, like cameras all around type of scenario. Especially coming at it, I was an introvert. I still am an introvert, but I came at it like so overwhelmed. I remember that first night I drove in and I couldn't see anything. The place is ginormous. And that's the first impression people have, is I never realized it was this big. So I'm navigating these roads and you're supposed to drive 5 miles an hour and you can't see anything. And I end up on the Esplanade, which is where you shouldn't be driving. But it kind of got me around a little shortcut. But, in terms of my experiences there, it's where do I begin? From, I mentioned before, emotions in art, and it's a roller coaster of emotions that whole week, and a lot of it's driven by the art you're seeing and the experiences you're seeing. Like, I want everyone to see a huge structure, beautiful structure burn. I think that really stuck with me, is that 180-foot tower, the temple that one year, that was ridiculous. Like, how quiet everyone gets during the temple burn, and how everyone just really embraces people and history with that. So there's stories I can't tell because I'll start crying my eyes out.
I don't want to make you cry.
Yeah, because it was an art piece. So, but with the people driving you through these art pieces and seeing the dedication of what a lot of people do, there's almost a contest to take it overly far at Burning Man. Do something, take it to those extremes. It's just because there's no reason. I want to bring out a dishwasher. There's no reason, but I'm going to bring it out anyway. So that motivation, and it really did break me a little bit of a creative shell. Every time I leave Burning Man, and I've heard people say this before, that you're kind of going with an expectation after a while to come back with a creative waterfall. Those first few weeks coming back from Burning Man, you've seen all this great art and just environments and people. You just like, okay, here's what I got to do. I just want to create. So there's a little selfishness out of that one in terms of getting something out of it. But, contributing to a lot of the art, I volunteered with them on their website for a few years. And it was fun to work with the people that have run it, to hear the walkie-talkies and see what it takes to run such an event of that size. So I always feel lucky that I had a couple of years of experiencing, how it works, in the background. And, so I recommend it for most people. And there's the kind of the Burning Man index. Like I told some friends, I'm like, I don't know, you might be like a 3-dayer or like a 5-dayer, because it's a rough environment. It's hot, of course, dusty, and you hit a wall. I mean, I don't think anyone has never on a Wednesday not hit a wall of the week and be like, why am I here?
Well, it's a lot of, I haven't been there, but I can imagine just the stimulus of it all, just sound and visual and the heat and, the energy off of other people and sound energy, light energy. It's got to be a sensory overload. And then to go through that for days, it's got to be quite almost like a spiritual journey for, I'm sure, quite a few people.
It is. And you mentioned the sound and the lights. Night is hard to explain. I don't think many photos do the justice of what night's like, especially with the lights. You're out in the middle of the playa, you look at the town and it's just lit up and it's blinking and there's fire and there's poofers, shooting flames, you know, huge art cars with dancing people driving by you. It's definitely a spiritual event. And, ultimately just fun. I think there should be an 11th principle: have fun. Like, no matter what you do, we're just here for the smiles. And in terms of the spiritual journey, there is the temple, which burns the night after the man burn. And people, it's very hard. I gotta admit, it's very hard to walk through the temple kind of midweek because everyone writes on it, has pictures and photos. And I mean, the energy is huge, but it's a heavy weight. And when you see that, and then you see it all being burned, you can almost not talk.
Wow.
It's just, and yeah, it's so hard, the temple, but I really enjoy it. They make beautiful temples out there. Of course, the man as well, um, has just great bases and just really unique environments. And seeing that burn connects either the messaging from a participant on the temple or connects the messaging the artist wanted to provide, and do it for the sake of doing it, right? And I've always enjoyed that about the general aesthetic of Burning Man is, you know, have fun, work fun, I don't know what but of course next year is always better.
Of course. Well, so while you're talking about that, it makes me think about how it could definitely give across the message of how temporary everything is in our world.
Yep.
And did you find like your first experience with that changed your perspective on a lot of things in the world and just art and everything else?
Yes, art and music. I haven't spoken too much about the music there just yet, but that spark that you get, and they actually have a website called Spark, that you get from seeing artists build these massive structures, do what it takes to get this out here and build it. Like you can kind of get that there's nothing I can't do type of personality, because you see it happening in front of you. And it might take other people, it might take volunteers, it might take that, but that community gets built and people bring their trade out there and enjoy working with it. At least, from, building to technology to everything, art cars. It's such a passionate community. And it's a society too. It represents a large portion of society, if not the entire America, because it really, a lot of people have it as their calling to kind of get in that scenario. But then the music happened. So I am, as a DJ, really into, like, techno music. As I always call it techno. It's actually a genre these days, but it's all the same to me. And these art cars are personified to me. They have, there'll be a fish or a shark. And what's neat about it, especially on the man burn night, is all the art cars kind of go from the outside and start getting around the man. And I love that. If I get a good perspective, it's like all these art cars are little beings kind of migrating to, like, the sun or something like that, like a moth. And people are just bouncing on these cars, having a good time. It is overwhelmingly electronic music based, Burning Man. And I mean, there's a great jazz camp there too as well. It's definitely more limited. It's geared towards electronic music. And that really drove my hope to be a DJ more towards electronic music, because my previous gig that I had in the city was more geared towards mixed format. It was just the area more alternative type of music, from punk and I enjoy all that, and I have a good library and kind of aesthetic for that. But ultimately, my passion is to play electronic music for people, and that's Burning Man said it can happen. And what's funny is it really didn't happen big. Like I always wanted to play an art car at Burning Man, and it's a hard ask because the people that build the art car, the people that fund the art car, the people that have gone to all the events to bring people to their personality, they're all DJs. They, it's a make it or break it world and do it yourself type of world. So I recently, as I've been DJing locally, realized how important community is to actually DJ on that art car. It just doesn't happen. I mean, you might get a certain type of weird situation where you need a quick DJ, and I always bring my USB stick and my headphones with me. But I'm finding it really inviting in the area I am that's very Burning Man heavy in terms of the community, that I and a friend were making ourselves our own events to hopefully drive into that art car realm, in terms of my goals. I don't know, it just seems when you see an art car drive by with people bouncing and a DJ and it's really loud, it looks a lot of fun. So
It's pretty incredible to me, and not even having been there, but just seeing the pictures and the videos, I can't imagine the energy of being there in person and just experiencing all of the different sensory things going on. And so it's I don't know, I appreciate you talking about it.
yeah, in closure, the one thing you always bring back with you are Burning Man dreams, and they never go away, because they're kind of funny. They're like, you never finish packing your car, you're forgetting stuff, you lose your bag, like all these concerns you have at Burning Man are like in your dreams forever, because it's a lot of effort to get there. It's effort and coincidentally a lot of money to experience Burning Man in ways that you want to. And it's very, I don't know, there's like a duality about it in a way when it comes to the work that it takes, to get there, the stresses you go through. But once you get through that gate, it's like a rush comes after you, because there's theoretically no phone service. I'm stuck here for a week, not going anywhere. And that gives you that freedom to like leave that other world behind for a week or so.
Wow.
and try to find this different aesthetic. My dad, we were at Disneyland once with my nephews, and the most poignant thing my dad ever heard him say was, he goes, you know, he goes, you know what? Everything's different in here in Disneyland. And my initial, I'm like, you would like Burning Man, because it was almost like he was experiencing Burning Man at Disneyland, that kind of different world, like everything
Right.
is upside
It's very
down in a way.
immersive.
Yeah. And I actually wrote a song about it once, and it's called It's Different in Here. And that was a really impressive thing. I should remind him about that. He probably would just be like, I don't know. But he sees art in trains. He always loved trains, and seeing how he talks about them and seeing how his eyes tear when he sees them, like, you're just talking about art. This is art to you.
We share that, actually. My dad and my brother are heavily into trains and always have been. We had
Yeah.
the model train set and all that stuff, and always have to visit the notable, like the old
Yep.
train stations, and see all the old cars and everything. There is something about train travel. I think you did a train travel over the summer, didn't you?
I did,
Last
with
year.
my dad.
Yeah.
It was originally a pandemic-based trip to stay on the ground and just see if you can find your own little pocket of safety going across the
Yes.
country. But seeing it through my dad's eyes, I've always known he loves trains. Sometimes you almost joke about it, but now I'm like a train fan, because we took the trip, and like you said, it's the sounds the over stimuli of seeing these beautiful places. My dad likes to see how it works. If he can just sit in the engine room and just watch all day, he would do that. But yeah, I mean, I did enjoy the sound a lot. Not when I was sleeping, but
Well, there is something about a train. I feel like I know we're on a little departure, but it is kind of connected as far as the vibration and the movement through things. It's almost like a time travel. It's another world. You're sort of
yeah,
uh I don't want to say the word trapped, but you're basically in a forced situation of staying in the same
yep,
container for X amount of hours, and it becomes a world unto itself. And
yep.
you've got the whole dynamic of the people and just the rhythm of the train on the tracks. And um, well, I guess I would ask that since you had that trip fairly recently, do you find that any of that kind of incorporated into your music at all, or just even like the feeling that you got, or maybe you have a nostalgia about it?
Coincidentally, that trip was preface to that art gallery opening. So I was actually working on the final
Wow.
versions of the tracks on the train, um, which actually I had to still basically undo them because the sound is so loud. You're almost overcompensating your little mix to cut through that loud train. But I also included a train whistle in one of the songs, to pay homage to that, because there was this one stretch we go through this canyon, like really tight canyon, like this much, kind of nice V shape to it, and that engineer just tooted that horn. Like, I mean, it's I want to read. I should read up on it more on it because it sounds like a chord. It's not really just like one horn. There's definitely multiple things going on with the tones, I think. But that hit me. Just hearing it so loud and the way he was pulling it, it was just like, happy times for that guy. So, but yeah, it's definitely a memorable point. Sounds can really get me there. And light, if the light hits the right way, you know.
Yeah, well, I'm always fascinated. Excuse me. I'm always fascinated with just the resonances and the harmonics of things, and I'm always stuck in the energy of things. But
Yeah.
do you? I guess I wanted to ask if there's been anything kind of like unusual that you've encountered or experienced all these years with the effects of sound and vibration. I mean, I know with the
Mm.
DJing, that obviously you are affecting that crowd of people with the sound and the
Yeah.
vibration of the music.
Uh, Definitely. And, to that point, I mean, that's probably what draws me to DJing, is the fact that, you're setting the stage of an environment for everyone to have a good time. I think everyone's been to the concert or the dance club, and all you're doing is smiling and looking at people's eyes, and you're just like, everyone's in the same page, kind of thing. And um, but in terms of, oh, by the way, you never want to put your drink on the subwoofer before you open it. So speaking of the
That's
sound,
a
so if
good
you put
tip.
like, yeah, for your little can of Coca-Cola on there, it's gonna just bounce around, and you open it, and
Right.
it goes all over your equipment. That didn't happen. So, uh, you know, I'm trying to think with sound. One thing, I loved about San Francisco was the foghorns. Uh, and the nights it would be so thick fog that you hear music. These guys and gals are definitely playing off each other. I have one recording of it, but the beauty, because each tone is a little different, it gets that personified effect to me that all these huge metal tanks are just communicating with each other, and it's almost like the people aren't even there anymore. You know, they're that cartoony little toot toot little thing. But you know, the environment it sets that those tones. I mean, it's definitely Brian Eno that drew me a lot towards environmental sound. Like you hear music wherever you are. Um, it's one thing I always wanted to ask Brian. You know, is San Francisco has this system that emergency alert system. It's been turned off for a few years, but it's going to come back. And what you do is you hear this alert throughout the entire city. It echoes like crazy. But I was like, man, if Brian Eno composed a piece, like a little 5-minute piece for this system, so the whole entire city is listening to the same song at the same time, I think that would be ridiculously cool, especially like with just knowing some of his pieces to say, you know, I think it definitely paints colors in your room, you know, a lot of ambient music, any music really.
I find that for sure.
You know,
And I love that idea. And if he doesn't do it, you should. In fact,
I
I
know.
feel like you should just do it. You should
I'm sure the
impose
FCC would enjoy like letting me play techno music over the emergency system. Sure, it'll be nice and clean. Gosh. But yeah, it's funny because they always tested like different voices, you know, trying to get it to be more clear because it does get muffled. But it's like natural reverb, the best reverb ever, which would really speak well to certain sounds. So I'd always like and San Francisco is at least on the more the southern side. It's southeast side. It's a auditorium. You know, Twin Peaks is to your left, Picard to your right. There's like Bernal Hill behind you, and you know the cityscape in front of you, and it's like the best Leslie
That's incredible.
effect. I think that would really be really cool if you did something like that.
Does the fog seem to change anything about the sound and the way that it moves around?
Wind does. Sound can be more enclosed. But one thing I learned about Burning Man too is if you're standing in the middle of 4 art cars, like each one on a corner, you'll hear different ones based on which way the wind's going. It's kind of a neat little effect. It's like crazy surround sound. But the wind does that. I find more. The fog kind of helps warm up the city a little bit. Coincidentally, it's you know there's always like the stages of weather in the Bay Area, and it's just funny how when the fog moves in and settles, you can actually warm up a little bit.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So, talking about like geographical locations, do you feel like that your music changes depending on, like, you've moved around a bit now, so do you feel that your music has changed with you as you've moved to these different areas at all?
I think so. Like my current place, I have room for just setting up pretty much everything I have in one place, and that's really nice. I didn't have a piano keyboard for quite a few years, except for a little one-handed one, and I did miss that a lot because I just didn't have the space for it. But it does influence a lot. I'm definitely affected by the environment. You know, coming out of high school, you know, I ran away to the West and really wanted to be in Big Sky. You know, see those album covers from the New Age music I was listening to. It just seemed like that's what I wanted to see. And you know, it's crazy how much, you know, it was a funny story. I guess one negative thing was it's funny.
We love stories
So
here, so.
yeah. So I was in the city one night and I was kind of going to sleep a little early. It's probably like 10 o'clock early. And I heard this music, you know, oh my gosh, this is neighbor. They're blaring the music. This is annoying. And of course I love loud music. So it's always this like try to give and take a little bit. But I was getting really mad. So like I stood up and I went outside to hear where it was coming from. And it turns out it was Metallica actually playing 4 miles away. So I was like, oh my gosh, what decade? But I can't believe I just got angry at Metallica playing too loud from 4 miles away. You know, I
Miles
was like,
away.
it's the wind. It was the wind was coming right at us.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
but
a
that
great
was funny.
example right there. Incredible.
The irony. Oh my gosh.
Well,
It's
in the area that we grew up in or went to school at, we had Waterloo Village nearby where they would have these concerts, and I lived, I don't know how many miles away, at least two, probably a lot more than that. I'd have to look at a
yeah.
map, but you could hear that music really pretty clearly on certain days.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you could hear it where you were, but
Not where I
it always
was.
seemed like it was a neighbor when it really
Yeah.
wasn't.
So, yeah, it's so funny. I was so embarrassed. You grow up listening to that stuff and you're all tough, and now I'm like, oh, they're too loud.
Well, I feel like our sensibilities and sensitivities change as we get older in these meat suits. So I use the word older, but I don't know. I feel like it's just part of our personal evolution.
Yeah. I told Metallica to get off my lawn. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So let's see now. Let me come up with a went to do you are there some really standout, impactful experiences that you've had with other people? Um, either, collaborating with people on making music or just maybe during your DJing or anything like that?
Wow, that's a good question. From a local from a local friend base, I have I just call him a jazz musician that we would play a lot, and I said a jazz musician because he's definitely has the ear for any type of, his perfect pitch. He can play to my weird stuff sometimes, but he taught me a lot, and a lot about just organization, general music theory structure, and we just always just had fun. And I think that was the really important thing, that you might get in a stressful situation, or some people feel like they have imposter syndrome at times, and I think we've all kind of been there.
Yes.
But sometimes just admitting that here's where I'm at. I can play keyboard, I can play this, but I'm not at your level. I can't play 17 instruments, and you don't want to feel, you still can contribute a lot. I think I try to tell people in those scenarios, and if you're just honest with yourself, it makes it fun because you're learning then, and the person's saying, "Oh, okay, I got you." And the technology helps a lot. You're basically just running a loop, and everyone's just kind of jamming, and that's always a fun time. With DJing, stories that I can talk about. you know, it's basically when you get the chills. It's funny um, when you have the mix that's good and the energy is good and everyone's jumping, and there's just that moment in time. And we play outside a lot. You might get a great sunset, and as much as you're just pressing buttons, I think there's a connection that people have just to rhythm. I think you talked about before, in the vibrations.
Yeah.
And every time there's a cheer or a whistle, you kind of get the chills, and it kind of brings you back. You know, it's kind of like surfing in a way, where you get these little wins along the way. Because most of the time surfing, you're not really surfing. You're waiting for a wave, or doing other things, duck diving. So you got to enjoy the process as much as you enjoy the reward. And with DJing, I find it rewarding. And I also ask myself every time I get up, I'm like, why am I doing this? What is me thinking that I can get behind these decks here and let people have a good time? But uh,
Do
I
you know
love
why
getting
you go out
feedback.
and do it? Is that you don't know?
I think it's a love of music, and I like to promote I think every DJ and even musicians want to have a perspective that they'll get a fan that's not necessarily a fan of that type of music. You showed them a different angle of what that music can offer. And I think that interest and that uniqueness is very important to me because, you know, the Nirvana of the 90s, the Fred again of now, like it's really like the change that can happen from that and influence so many more people for something that's so acutely different, I think is awesome. And electronic music always, to me, was fascinating how fast it moves. You know, a new genre would come out every 6 months, a new genre, and there's millions and trillions of songs at this point that you'd want to play, and there's just not enough lifetime to listen to it all. So a lot of being a DJ is being a historian. A lot of times, I think, is try to find the winners that people should hear, and from the ambient stuff I do, or the more kind of producing stuff I do compared to DJing, it's definitely a different type of approach. I think I didn't know which direction I was going with that, but
No, that's okay.
theoretically, yeah. DJing is more fleeting. I think this is what I'm going to say, that like the songs you play as a DJ should be enjoyed the first time, and sometimes the only time you've ever heard that song. It's like it's meant to be very enjoyable, with the rhythms and the vibrations and the samples and the familiarity, uh, to offer that type of, benefit where everyone's enjoying songs they never heard them before, but everyone's dancing and smiling, and it can just be, like I said, give you chills.
It's also that temporary thing too. Like it's just there. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing for just a short amount of time, and then it's gone. And all you have is, unless you're recording it,
Yeah.
all you have is the memory of how you experienced it as an individual and how it made you feel, and it lives on as a memory, but it's really a temporary blip in our timeline here as humans. So that's interesting to me.
It reminds me of a time we DJ'd locally. There's this beach that only exists for 3 hours a day, like 2 or 3 days a year. So we found one of the days. We actually did this twice. I think it happened each weekend for 2 weekends, but we set up all our DJ gear down there. There's people that know about it, so they were down there. There's surfers in the water, and like you said, it's temporary. We were there to experience the temporal zone, just really enjoying the moment and get some pictures maybe, and like you said, might record it. But stuff like that is the serendipity that you're looking for, to happen, and you just meet more people doing that, and it's just a lot of fun to just interact with so many different just types of people and genres of music. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, the last thing I want to ask you, because I don't want to keep you too long,
That's right.
is if you have any sort of advice for new people that are interested in making music or DJing. Anything you want to say? I mean, you've said a lot already. You've had some good nuggets in there, but is there something that you'd want to tell people that are starting out?
I gotta say, "Liberate the Stone" was awesome. I think that is because it's so poignant. I think, and it allows you to be yourself. It allows you to be creative out of an infinite amount of possibilities. And I think a lot of artists are finding their emotions a lot of times and trying to understand them, themselves, what they feel. And if you liberate that and it comes out in what you're creating, sky's the limit. And being yourself is, to me, one of my, if I can just leave any tidbit, is try your best to be yourself, because if you embrace your fears and embrace your talent at times, uh, and know that everyone is going through, every creative person, every person that has a family feels like they're not doing the best, right? And you are doing the best. There's no other way around it. Don't look for genres, just allow it to happen. And what I like to do, actually, kind of like from a functional way, uh, make music first that fits an environment. I think a lot of the new devices right now are very generative and offer a way to tinker with the knobs a little bit and then go do your laundry. I think a lot of times you might get into this zone. It's called in the box, in terms of electronic music. Are you in the computer making music, or do you have these external devices? I like having a little bit of both, but you know, like this of the third kind project is I did the same type of thing. I would make a loop or let it sit and then just walk around, just enjoy it. And if you would start finding that it either gets too repetitive or you want to add something, or it starts just having a life of its own, and always just embrace yourself, embrace randomness, um, be that brand, find that piece of art, that's kind of a finite representation out of an infinite amount of possibilities. And I think that's really beautiful about it.
And failure is not necessarily a failure, right? It's just
No,
a way to put you in another direction and maybe look at something a different way to get a result that might be
yeah.
better and unexpected, but better.
I definitely a good point. I have this song called Restart and Refinish because it was going all the wrong directions, but there was like one track that was like, there's something here. I got to figure it out. So for like 2 years, I would once every 4 months, I would say, okay, I'm going to do another 3 mixes. And ultimately, when I did finish it, it's one of my most commented tracks. So I found, because a lot of times you'd be told, oh, it's on the cutting room floor. If it's not going anywhere, just move on. But sometimes as an artist, they become your children.
Right,
Your
exactly.
portfolio is like, I don't want to let go of these things, and
Yeah.
keeping them organized, and it's a lot more fun. You can be more expressive that way, I think, in your music.
Right. Sometimes it's good to revisit things and rework things.
Yep. And
Then I
just do it
have
for the process.
exactly. Um, you don't have to answer this, but I wanted to ask. You talked about the third kind a couple of times throughout, and some people might be curious where you got the name from. Would you be able to sort of tell us why, or?
Sure. I mean, it definitely stems from a certain movie and just the concept of a third kind. What I like about of the third kind is it allows you to preface it with anything. You know, is it Close Encounters? Is it a bagel of the third kind? Like so.
Bagel.
But I think it gives there's an openness to it. There's like, dare I say, a liberation to it. That it's like an unfinished sentence.
Love that so
Um,
much.
yeah, but for some reason when I read it, it kind of feels like a sentence in a way that it kind of came out. But I always found funny because a lot of it was the domain name, because you can make a subdomain, so you can literally be, bubblegum.ofthethird.com, and that's the nerd in me.
Love it. It's so great.
Yeah, and I've always been, we talk about artificial intelligence. We didn't talk about space and stuff, but I think in our conversations we enjoy talking about the expansive worlds and universes that are all around us, and universities. That's what I almost said. But yeah, but like as you mentioned, it's the uncharted territory we're heading into, and hopefully we can get the proper representation for everyone to really enjoy it. and take advantage of it if they want. But no
Right,
one should.
because you don't want anyone just telling you how it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this has been just excellent. I'm really glad that you were able to join me, and I appreciate you talking a bit about yourself and your work. And hopefully we'll be able to give some links to people so they can listen to some of the work. And I'm going to end the recording now, but thank you.
Thank you too. Yeah.
Thank you.